getting onto the topic of today, which is employee advocacy. This is all about building employee productivity and retention, inspiring them to share your brand story, to equipping them with the tools they need to do that, like a toolkit, and really how do you build an advocacy program and reward employees for doing so. So this is the context for the conversations. And just to kind of get your minds hopefully spinning a little bit, I'd like to speak a little bit about employee engagement and some broad strokes that I think are absolutely critical. The first thing is, if you're a small business, if you're a high growth company, if you are a multinational with a global footprint, the largest line item on your P&L typically is staff, is employees, that human capital that you invest in every single day. Yet what I've seen almost across the board with all the different companies that we work with is there's always an opportunity to do a better job of thinking them not so much as human capital, but rather to look at them as human beings, to recognize that these are a group of people that have consciously chosen to show up each day and invest their time and energy in working towards a common goal that manifests through your business. And that may sound like something that's idealistic and positive and well-intentioned, but it's absolutely critical because it's a shift in mindset that makes all the difference to your relatedness with them, how complicit and how involved they feel in the purpose of your company. And that ultimately affects their satisfaction, their productivity, and basically the bottom line of your business. So the first thing to do is to really consider the mindset that you exercise each day at work. Are you looking at your employees as human beings, or are you looking at them as employees in inverted comma, as line items, as human capital, and really kind of treating them almost like data points rather than as flesh and blood people that choose to spend time with you each day? The second point I'd like to make is that if you really do want to inspire your employees, if you do want to unlock their best selves and inspire them to bring their highest purpose to work, you really need to tell them what the purpose of the company is. You need to explain to them what it is. And it's absolutely incredible. We get the privilege of working with very, very small startups, high growth companies, and very, very large brands. And almost every single one of them faces the challenge of either articulating the purpose more clearly, sharing it more effectively internally, or scaling it out through their organization in new and more effective ways. There's not a brand out there that gets it right. So specific to what we're talking about today, do not miss the step of actually telling your employees, your organization, what the purpose of your company is. And that can take the form of a presentation in a town hall meeting, in an annual meeting where the CEO gets up and talks about the next year and the goals for the business. It can inform regular weekly blog posts and vlogs that leadership may do on the company blog site. But time and time again, we come across the issue where A, people don't think about their employees as human beings, and B, on the strength of that, they don't then explain to them what the purpose of the company is. If you do that, you will absolutely be ahead of half the other companies out there. And your employees will be very, very clear about where they go to work each day, what it stands for, what role they can play, and why they should give a damn, why they should actually feel like this is a place to work and that the mission of the company or brand is aligned with what they care about. The third thing I want to mention is, on the strength of sharing your purpose and story, brand story with your employees, give them ways to participate. And what I mean by that is, many companies, even when they share their purpose effectively, they then fall short of actually saying to their employees, here's something you can do to make a difference in alignment with our purpose and brand story. They literally don't give them a way to get involved. So they get the employee base interested, they get people inspired and motivated, but then there's nowhere for that energy to go. So you need to make sure that you give them ways to participate. But how you do that is absolutely critical. It's not simply a case of saying, we are committed to early education or STEM or K-12 or whatever else it might be, and then you leave it at that. You've got to say, okay, here are the different opportunities you can participate. You can maybe make a donation. You could volunteer in a mentorship program. You could educate some young entrepreneurs as to how they can make a difference in the world. You've actually got to go to your employee base with tangible ideas and inspire them to choose how they want to show up. And that word choose is absolutely critical, because it's not a question of telling people what to do. You can't be prescriptive. In as much as they're human beings, as I said at the beginning, you've got to recognize that they want to play a creative role in how they show up. So if you give them a toolkit of ways to participate, if you give them simple actions they can take, like sharing a blog post, writing a blog post, participating in some video content, volunteering at an event, making a donation, playing some sort of mentorship role, then they can look at that and go, okay, great. I understand the purpose of the company. I understand how our story is bringing that purpose to life. I see there are ways for us to participate, and I'm going to choose how I want to show up. And what it really, by doing that, what you're doing is really layering on sort of psychographics. And by that, I mean, you know, there are many, many companies out there that look at their audience and their employees as through demographics and gender and these sorts of different filters. But not a lot of them look at it through psychographics, which is we're all very different types of people. Some people are verbal, some people are kinesthetic, some people like to write, some people like to be active and do things. So you've got to recognize that those differentiating ways that people like to participate so that they can actually then choose how they want to show up in a way that feels congruent with who they are and how they want to participate. And then what I'd like to do then is talk about the last part of that, which is rewarding your employees. So you're looking at them as human beings. You're very clear about your purpose and brand story with them. Then you are giving them ways to participate that are specific and appropriate to them. But then the last place where so many brands drop the ball is actually rewarding them for doing so. Every single one of us, as a function of being human beings, wants to be recognized, wants to have some significance, wants to get some social currency for the time and sweat equity that they're investing. And so rewarding them may be as simple as an acknowledgement saying thank you. It could be, in some companies, what they do is they do perks. So you may get a discount at a gym membership or a voucher for a discount at a local restaurant. There may simply be a leadership board somewhere at the company, and you can see that the company recognizes the impact work that they're doing, and they actually put it up for everybody to see, and they sort of tap into the competitive instincts of their internal community, their employee community, through a leaderboard. Sometimes it's by asking people who would like to participate in an ambassador program. So they may say, okay, great, who would like to be a storyteller on the brand's behalf? And we all know those people in our companies who are like that, the ones who are engaged with social media, the ones who like to talk about the company, the ones who are excited about its mission and purpose and story. So you make them a brand ambassador. And so that's another way that you can reward them. And then finally, you know, you give them those toolkits, as I mentioned before. Make sure that you equip them with the tools they need so that you can show them how they can show up and tell a brand story and then get rewarded for doing so. So I wanted to open up the discussion with those 4 key points. The first one being shift from viewing your employees purely as human capital, as data points, to really being human beings who want to participate in something meaningful that gives them significance, you know, in the world and meaning in their own lives. Secondly, make a conscious effort to tell your brand purpose and story to your employee base, not just once a year, but on a regular basis, quarterly, or even more often, whether it's through blog posts and so on. And then third, make sure you give them ways to participate. And then fourth, reward them for doing so. If you do those 4 things, I cross my heart, which is a funny thing to say, I cross my heart that you will actually be miles and miles ahead of, you know, other brands that are out there struggling to unlock the full value of their employee base. And so I'll start going to some of the questions, and thank you for folks sending in the questions. Again, just type them in on the right-hand side in the chat box. And then again, this time is for you. It's not for us. So please fire away with your questions so we can add value to your business. The first question is, we've launched an employee campaign around our company purpose. We give them a list of ideas of how to participate. Our issue is keeping them engaged after the initial launch. How do you keep momentum going? How do you build over the long term? Fantastic question. Absolutely fantastic question. And why I'm excited to answer this is the answer actually maps across to your external marketing as well, in the sense that how do you build a self-sustaining customer community or consumer community out there in the world, and how do you do it inside your company as well? And there's a couple of things you need to do. Firstly, You need to define your purpose and then look at every single tactical opportunity that you're going to give your employees to create as installments in that longer story arc of your purpose. Let me explain what I mean. Most brands, small, especially small brands and mid-sized brands, are so under-resourced, they don't even get time to think about strategy or planning. They're just racing to keep up with everything that's going on, plus keeping the lights on and the business going. You know, we're a small business here at WeFirst, we completely understand. But if you really want to build engagement over the long term through employees, you set aside, you prioritize the time and you set aside and you say, here's our purpose, here's our brand story. Where do we want to be in 12 months' time in terms of employee engagement? For example, we want 50% of our employees to have volunteered in one of the different program opportunities. Or we want to reach this milestone in terms of donation matching with employee contributions. Or we want this number of employees mentoring people in the local community. And then you work backwards from that and you look at all the different events that you have going on, the opportunities to engage employees. It might be, you know, your annual conference, it might be a retreat, it might be trade shows and industry events, and you plug those in, and then you look at all the gaps and you plan tactics specific to each of those gaps. And then what you do is you actually plot a through line where you engage some employees, and then rather than dropping the ball after that engagement tactic and then having to rebuild it all over again, you actually, as soon as they've engaged, you upgrade them and talk about the next opportunity that's coming up and who would like to participate. And you could only imagine if somebody has shown up and given their time and energy to something and they've been recognized for it, and even better yet, rewarded for it, whether it's just recognition inside the company or on a leaderboard or whatever else it might be, and then you say to them, here's another opportunity coming up, you've got a really, really good chance of taking a third, a half, ideally all of those people with you through to the next engagement opportunity. So the first part of my answer is to really, from a strategic point of view, back out of the result you want to create and plot your different tactical opportunities to engage your employees with a through line through the year that builds on those tentpole events that are already there, the corporate events that are already there, but then you layer in different tactics. The second thing I'd say is make sure it's creative, you know, and fun. And what I mean by that is too often, for all the right reasons, brands will just default to the usual suspects when it comes to an employee engagement, whether it's training, mentorship, or it's donation matching or whatever else it might be. But actually take the time and sit down and go, okay, what's our unique purpose in the world, our unique story we're telling? How do we bring that to life? Let me give you an example. Airbnb, their big positioning is belong anywhere, which is really evocative. Their insight is, you know, that typically until Airbnb came along, if someone wanted to belong somewhere, you only really truly belonged at home. But their insight was, well, if you can actually go and live in other people's homes all around the world, you can belong anywhere. What a powerful insight. So when it comes to employee engagement, what could you do? How could you increase that sense of belonging so that people feel like they belong at the company more than they belong in the community in which they're working more? And then that will unlock a number of different creative ideas. It could be participating or sponsoring block parties in different areas in which they work. It could be reaching out to local community people and being brand ambassadors for Airbnb and saying, hey, who would like to volunteer a perk for people who are Airbnb guests, so Airbnb sends more people your way when they come and stay in your local community. So keep it fresh and engaging. Don't just go, oh, we're going to write a check to somebody and employees can make some contributions. We're just going to volunteer some time. We're just going to do a mentorship program. But really look at it and go, as a function of what's truly unique to us, what are different creative ideas that we can bring to life? Because that will allow you to cut through the clutter in terms of social impact work and inside your category and outside your category, because you're being more creative about it. And then obviously that will engage your employees more effectively, because you're going to do one idea which was fun, and then, oh my God, this is another idea, and here's another idea. And when you do those different ideas, each of which is creative in your own right, you also have a better chance of attracting different employees, because one employee may not be interested in a volunteer day where you go and do something at a local school, but they may be interested in participating in organizing a local community event that's a big party that's going to be hosted by your company. So again, kind of like the toolkit idea, different people like to do different things. And so make sure that you leverage the creativity that's inside your company to inspire different types of employees to get involved in different ways. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope you see how that maps across to consumer engagement out there in the world. Every tactic you use out there through your marketing, whether it's a new product launch, whether it's direct mail, whether it's a national TV spot, whatever it is, make sure that they are all ringing the same bell, the same message of your purpose and story over time, but there's connective tissue between them, where when you have that engagement, that peak of engagement, don't let it go and then have to rebuild that sandcastle at the foot of waves again, but rather give them an opportunity to say, well, we so appreciate your participation here, let's take it to the next level, and let's take it to the next level. That's when your community will take on a life of its own. That's when you build a self-sustaining community internally and externally. And it's a function of strategy and planning, and it's a function of creative engagement that inspires people to want to play a role, be rewarded for doing so, and then go on to the next opportunity. So we've got another question here, which is, what about if our company has social media limitations with regard to speaking on behalf of the company to others? Yeah, that's a really, really good question. There's a lot of different brands out there that, for all the right reasons, have guidelines and guardrails as to how they should use social media. And the most important thing that you should do is to set the limitations so that your employees feel safe about what they can say. And so there's a couple of things that should happen in order. Firstly, you must inspire leadership to engage with social media, because it serves as a powerful permission slip to everyone in the organization to do the same. Howard Schultz tweets, Tony Hsieh tweets, Richard Branson tweets, Bill Gates tweets. They all tweets. I don't know if all of them are snapping yet, but anyway, by the way, feel free to follow on Snapchat, Simon Mainwaring. We're putting stuff out there. We're actually putting a lot of bite-sized branding out there, tips every day about what you can do to build your brand. But the CEO and the C-suite, it's a huge permission slip for everybody else to actually engage. That's the first piece. The second bit is to pro-rata or break out different tiers within your organization, which establish who can say what. And what I mean by that is, I had the good fortune to speak to some of the folks behind the social media outreach behind President Obama's campaign the first time and the second time. And one of the dynamics that they leveraged was very, very interesting, which was there was two tiers. There were certain people that had the license to speak on the brand's behalf because they'd been trained, because they'd been sort of mentored in how to do that. And they could answer any question on behalf of the Democratic Party or that particular candidate. So these were sort of the higher order brand ambassadors who had more license to say what they wanted. Then there were broader base sort of rank and file people in the organization that were schooled in sort of certain answers that they could give and were given very clear parameters as to what they could or couldn't say. So it's much like a brand ambassador program inside any company. You've got those who, you know, as a function of how they've shown up at the company, as a function of how they understand, how well they understand the brand and its story. Maybe it's a function of how long they've been there and how closely aligned they are with the views of leadership, that they can speak on the brand's behalf with confidence. And then there are the broader employee base that you should give guidelines and guardrails. And what we do at WeFirst, and our work with different types of companies, is that we equip them with a very powerful tool, which includes language guidelines and an employee advocacy toolkit. And that toolkit includes things like, what do we stand for? What's our purpose? What's our story? What is our key messaging? What are certain do's and don'ts? And what are some different things, very simple things that you can do specific to different channels? And that is a digital document that is infinitely scalable through the organization that gives them very, very clear guidelines and guardrails as to what they can and can't do. And then there is there is oversight by, you know, those who monitor your social media channels on a daily basis, just to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And sometimes things do go wrong because it's a fluid, real-time process, and you know, we're human beings and we're fallible, and that's okay. You know, what was it, 5 years ago, we would freak out when something would go wrong, and everyone's like, oh yeah, except when it's bad leadership behavior or whatever else it might be. We've got another question here. Hopefully that helped. We've got a question here, which is, would you say that many companies need to shift their cultures to best leverage the mediums of the social era? Absolutely. It's very, very, well, actually, this is a nuanced answer in the sense that you're seeing more and more digital native brands, whether it's Airbnb or whoever it might be, going back to television. Because if you look at the statistics, and I've had the pleasure of speaking at events for Sony and Viacom and other things, you know, if you look at the statistics, television is still an incredibly powerful way to reach people very effectively. But obviously it's cost prohibitive if you're a smaller company. That said, you'll see that some of the most successful marketing campaigns counterintuitively start on the sort of arguably free tools like social media. For example, the Always campaign, Like a Girl, which started off as a social media piece of content that took on a life of its own that was then elevated to a Super Bowl spot, you know, which is the sort of pinnacle of high spending for airtime in traditional media. So there's arguments on both sides of the fence. That said, if you look at the proportion of spend of different companies out there, and you can look at Adweek or Advertising Age or Nielsen or Pew, and you can see all this data, there is a clear shift towards a greater proportion of spend going digital and social. That said, and this is why it's a nuanced answer, there's no such thing as a straight answer, I guess, in the world of marketing. But that said, there's a huge issue around the ROI, the real value of social media engagement, and there's so much bots going on. You know, there's so much sort of automated engagement and vanity metrics out there now. And, you know, even specifically, Snapchat poses the question, you know, is disposable, ephemeral content, is that valuable? You know, even though your audience likes to engage that way, they want to snack on content. It's like reality television for everyone. Is that a value to a brand when the content itself, which they invest hard dollars in, doesn't live longer than 24 hours? And, you know, as you see in terms of the flight of eyeballs and brands to Snapchat being driven by the expectations of younger demos like Gen Z, it seems that that's where the marketplace is headed. That said, and this is an increasingly nuanced answer, so I hope this is helpful, but forgive me, we are looking at an absolutely transformative period coming up with VR, virtual reality, supplemented by augmented reality and drones and so on. You know, when you look at the impact of drones outright in terms of delivery, in terms of, you know, trucks and supply chains being affected by drones, that's transformative. When you look at VR and its ability to create these immersive experiences that are increasingly like actually being there, where they trigger all the sensorial sort of cues in your body to trick yourself that you're actually there. So you could be in the front row of a concert in Rio de Janeiro, sitting in your living room in Los Angeles. What's that going to do to marketing? I mean, different companies out there, Goldman Sachs and others, have said VR is going to be as big, if not bigger, than television in 10 years' time. So yes, you need to invest in these new channels. Yes, it's a nuanced debate because traditional media is still very, very important. And yes, it's an ever-changing landscape because, you know, there are some big, big tools coming, which include, you know, virtual reality, which are already here, but are coming in the sense of going to scale and mass market. There is robotics. There is AI. When you look at, you know, the latest iteration of Siri, which is this virtual assistant, which was just launched, called Viv, you know, which is a rival to Siri, called Viv. And now, you know, Facebook is talking about a virtual assistant. All of these different tools are going to impact the way that you relate to a brand, how a brand can relate to you, and as a function of that, how your employees can speak on your behalf to share your purpose and your brand story. So it's, you know, it's a complicated answer, but the very, very short version, if we were sitting down at dinner together and we'd had 2 glasses of wine too many, and you're like, oh my God, I got it, but that's a hell of a lot of, you know, answer. What's the skinny, you know, what's the net of it? The net of it is, yes, you need to invest where the eyeballs are and keep moving with the marketplace. You need to constantly maintain and protect your relevance. And once you do that, you know, that will allow you to not only engage, keep the eyeballs you've got and stay relevant to your employees who are responding to all these changes as well, but also to attract new eyeballs. And so thanks for that question, Greg. That was great. And also, you know, thank you before for Ethical Biz for that question. So we have another question here, which, oh, there we are, is what are some good examples? Douglas asked, what are some good examples? Who is doing it right? Well, based on the complexity of that last answer, there's lots of brands doing different bits well. Who is doing it right? I think there's a couple of examples I would give. One is, and they're passed out or defined through different lenses. So the lens of actually making a difference and the authenticity of that driving brand awareness and employee engagement. I think brands like Timberland are doing a great job. You know, Timberland has a National Day of Service. It's become a tradition inside the company. Something like 78% of employees have participated at any one time. And I think, you know, the most powerful thing they've done is they've created a very clear alignment between the role of an employee, what the company stands for, and the difference it's making in the world. So purpose, employees, and community. That through line, purpose and story, because your story is an articulation of your purpose, purpose and story, employees' roles, and then community engagement. They've done that very, very well. And so it's got to the point where employees are starting to look forward to these events, and they become a tradition inside the company. A second example, I think, and it's, you know, it's not peculiar, it's from the same category, but it's not, I didn't suggest it for that reason. I think Patagonia is doing a great job because they marry not only very powerful marketing tools and also REI, where they celebrate their employees in their marketing. They get their employees to tell their story, but also they bring it to life in very real and tangible ways through social impact work. For example, Patagonia is doing the Damnation Project to restore major watercourses here in the US. They've got the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. They've got Footprint Chronicles. You know, they're doing lots of sort of social activism, which has a real tangible impact, which shows the employees that they actually mean it and they're genuinely committed to a result rather than just playing lip service to it. In the case of REI, if you go and look at, you know, they're a co-op, they're a member co-op, and if you have a look at their co-op, go to REI member stories, you will see 60, 70 films that celebrate the stories of their members. And what those stories are focused on are what the environment means to those people. In one case, a gentleman, you know, who lost his son, but has been a lifetime canoeist, talks about what the river means to him and time out on the water and the resonance of that in terms of his son who he used to paddle with and so on. And suddenly you humanize the brand. You see that this person associated with the company is a very real human being with a very personal story, and the environment is incredibly powerful to them. So I think these are all great examples. So I think it's an extension of looking at your employees as human beings and asking them how would they like to participate and putting the spotlight on them, and then doing that in channel specific ways. So it might be longer form videos for YouTube. It might be asking your brand ambassadors inside the company to snap out different short stories all the time about what their company and its purpose means to them. I would also encourage you to look at Starbucks. If you look at Starbucks site, they have purpose films by their employees. What is the personal purpose of different employees? You'll see it for, you know, people working in the kitchens and behind the counter and so on. Very, very powerful stuff. We have another question here, which is from Abbott, which is, what about engaging your company's values via internal office efforts such as a Meatless Monday initiative? A Meatless Monday initiative. That's got a certain charm to it and concern, perhaps. Public transport only to work, and then promoting those on social media or PR. Does that feel too self-directed? Would it be better to engage your company's mission in larger community efforts, like such volunteer efforts? It's a great question. Like, do you shine a spotlight on your internal efforts, or do you as a company and employee base go out and participate in broader community efforts? There's no right or wrong. Both of those are valuable. I think the common denominator has to be that you're doing it with integrity, that you mean it, that you are actually committed to the result, rather than what a lot of brands do when they talk about their purpose or story and engage their employees. They do it in a self-directed way. And let me explain what I mean. You can look at pretty much any boilerplate copy on any brand out there, and particularly on the foundation side, and they will say things like, the blah blah foundation since year 1990 blah blah has raised X amount of dollars in service of a cause X. In doing so, we have partnered with X, Y, and Z, blah blah blah, and say it's about feeding, children that suffer food scarcity here in the US. A better way is to flip that around and to get off yourself and onto your audience and say, for example, too many children go to bed hungry every night. At Company X, we are committed to fixing that problem. Through our partnerships with X, Y, and Z, we have raised X amount of dollars and given these amount of hours, which has meant X, Y, and Z to these kids. And it's a totally different come from. So, as long as you're making, whether it's an internal activity like a public transport day, or whether it's participating in a public event or a community impact event, you have to make sure that you speak to it in a way that's off yourself as a company and onto the impact you're having. A great example is what Gap did with their One Stitch Closer campaign. If you go to Gap One Stitch Closer, you'll be able to see the campaign. And it's a website that celebrates the story of several women around the world, 15 women around the world. And each one of those women was supported by Gap through mentorship, where they actually helped to train those entrepreneurs to make a difference in the world. But the films themselves that they shared across social media are not films about Gap. They are films about that young entrepreneur lady who has made a difference in the lives of others out in the world. So not only are they off themselves as a company, they are focused on the impact that other person is having out there in the world. So, if you look at the close of those small films, it says, Veronica, in one case, is empowering other women. And, Gap is there to inspire women to make a difference, and then they resolve to the logo. But the only time you see the brand, there's no product, there's no fashion items. The only time you see the brand is at the end, when they talk about its commitment to supporting others to making a difference. So I think it's either or. You can do both. It's not either or. You can do both. I think it's fun to show what your company stands for through the activities it does. So we do it at We First. We post things on the wall here. Someone went into our bathroom the other day at our office. I'm a client. And they said, oh my God, I feel like I just walked into a Pinterest wall. And all over the wall of the bathroom are the different things that we put up each week, which are kind of reflective of the values of We First. And then we post on social and Facebook, my personal page, public figure profile page, and the company page, also on Instagram, those different images. And a lot of people like them because, literally, and they like them generally because these are all value propositions that are meaningful to everyone. They're a reminder to us what we stand for. And they're to reminding ourselves that we're committed to that, and so on. And then in terms of larger initiatives, I think it's very rewarding for people to go out into the world and participate in a larger movement, to feel like they're a member of something larger than themselves, larger than their company. So, it's wonderful to see organizations like United Way and Feeding America and City Year and all these amazing organizations creating these tentpole events that aggregate all these different brands who are making a difference. I mean, probably the most celebrated and rightly so example out there right now is Giving Tuesday, which brings together so many brands and so many nonprofits and basically creates a marketplace where people can make a contribution on a day when typically most of the country is focused on looking after themselves through, Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and it's called Giving Tuesday. So it's a very, very powerful idea, and it's really rally people and really rallying people around a cause or an organization. So we've got a question here as well. I missed earlier on. I'm sorry, in the questions that you're texting in. What types of rewards are most meaningful to employees? This is from Stacy. Thank you, Stacey. What type of rewards? It's interesting. There are in-kind rewards, and there are intangible rewards, and there are tangible rewards. You know, a tangible reward might be a day off. Intangible reward that is equally meaningful might be recognition inside a company. You know, as I talked about before in terms of a leaderboard. But imagine, you know, a more dramatic example of that is company blog posts. You know, you once a week or once a month, you celebrate an employee and what they're doing. For example, maybe a lady or a gentleman, Bill in accounting or Bill in HR, volunteers at a pet shelter on the weekend. And no one knew that. His colleagues around him knew that. But the fact that the company recognized that, and the fact that the company celebrated those values because they're in alignment with the company's value, and the fact that they prioritized their time enough to actually go out and capture that story where they said, hey, Bill, we appreciate that you do this on the weekend, and it really speaks to who you are and why you're a valuable member here. Would you be able to go out with a camera and just sort of on your phone and create a 2-3 minute film about the pet shelter on the weekend? And then, you post that on the company blog, and once a week or once a month, you celebrate somebody inside the company. Instantly, people feel seen. Instantly, it brings the values of the company to life. Instantly, it creates a competitive landscape where someone else in the company who's doing something else meaningful is like, hey, I'm doing things as well. I'm part of a literacy program or over here, or we give to this cause all the time, or I show up at all these community events and I want to tell that story a little bit. I want to give them some exposure because I care about it. Just simply by doing that, you shift the dynamic, you shift the culture inside the organization to one which is framed exclusively around business to one that's framed around a broader roster of efforts that reflect the company's core values. So it's not just the products you offer, there's not just the services you offer, but there are the things you do out in the world as a community member, as a member of society, and as a citizen of the world that will really speak to employees and to your broader customer community. So, you've got tangible examples, you've got intangible examples, and then there are very, very sort of specific ones that a lot of companies use. It can be, discounts at a restaurant, it could be discounts at a gym, it could be another one that's really interesting that we see quite a lot, which may seem counterintuitive because maybe people don't want lunch with their boss. But, once a month, an employee gets recognized and they get to sit down with the CEO and have lunch. We've actually seen that in Brazil with a company, Caixa Seguradora, that we've worked with, the third largest insurance company in Brazil. And surprisingly, there are people who would love to sit down and get that proximity to CEO, especially in large companies, talk about what they care about and get that relatedness, because that is of value to them and their career, but also that's bragging rights. And they come back and people are like, wow, so you had lunch with the boss. What are they like? Because sometimes, there's a little bit of the rare air in the C-suite, in the executive level, where people don't get a lot of face time on a human level. So a very, very simple thing you can do. And look at the examples of Google and Facebook. I mean, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they do their, monthly sort of get-togethers with the audience. I had the privilege of speaking up at Google, and you go in there and they have their town halls and everyone gets together and they're there to answer any questions. One of the most powerful ways you can get your employees engaged is just get them in a room together and give them some airtime to ask some questions. Oh, you're welcome, Stacey. I'll tell you something we do at WeFirst, which may sound kind of dorky, but I don't know, it works for us until someone here tells us different, is that we have our weekly meeting, our status meeting, where we talk through projects and, align energy and focus and all that sort of stuff. But we start off each meeting with what we call strengths and stretches. And truth be told, that term, strengths and stretches, came from my daughter's school, where it's one of those progressive schools in LA where you don't ever say good or bad, or you failed or succeeded. So everything's a strength or a stretch. So anyway, we talk about strengths and stretches, which is, hey, a strength this week was I'm pleased about this happened. A stretch is, I'm struggling on this area. And then also another thing that we've layered on is what is something you're working on personally. So it might be, in my case, to be more available, to be present when my teenage daughters are available for me rather than expecting them to be available when I come home from work or whatever. Anyway, the larger context there is to build in engagement and relatedness and humanity into the very procedural things you do as a function of being a small or large organization, which is status meetings or planning sessions or weekly updates. I know a lot of companies that have a reset before they have a meeting. And they're not just sort of health and wellness and personal development companies where they make sure that they all check in and get grounded and kind of clear their heads. So they're focused on whatever the meeting is about, rather than sitting there thinking about the 10 other things that are going on. This is all about humanizing your culture and recognizing that your employees are human. There's another question here from Anderson. Hey, Anderson. What about large global organizations? How do you scale employee engagement or advocacy on a big scale when you have multiple offices, regions, and countries? This is a great question. And we do a lot of work in this area with large organizations. And here's some of the forms that this takes. I'll give you a little bit of a checklist of some of the things that we do that we've found are necessary to scale purpose and story throughout an organization. The first is that very, very clear articulation of your purpose and story, without which all bets are off. Secondly, you can do workshops with leadership and with marketing and with key voices or leads within the company to make sure everyone's aligned and everyone feels a part of the process. So those workshops are absolutely important. And part of the purpose of those workshops is to educate brands as to why it's important. What's the business case for purpose? And how are other people inside your industry and outside your industry showing up in terms of their story, so that they can see that there's a business case here and it's a competitive thing and that they really should engage. Then below the workshops, there are webinars. So you create evergreen webinars that can be subtitled in different languages, so they're scalable around the world, and they can be used both for onboarding and also for just with your existing employee base, upgrading them and sharing those with them and asking them to watch them. But they're evergreen in the sense that you can always use them. Then there is content that speaks to what your company stands for, because really we're still human beings that relate in a storytelling way. So a manifesto film. We did one with the great folks at Tom's and Bain Capital and Boston Consulting Group last year, and Farm League. A film that really speaks to the mission of the company and tells it in a 2-minute film rather than lots of talking in an airless boardroom somewhere. Then there's employee films. How do you celebrate employees and their engagement? One of the simplest ways is to get some of those employees who have a powerful story to tell and interview them, and then intercut some of the B-roll that you have from different initiatives you've done, and create those films and put it out there and socialize it amongst the company. And then there's the ongoing training that you can do with them as to what the company stands for, how you bring it to life, how you do it in channel specific ways, and the way the marketplace is moving to make sure that you stay relevant. And sometimes with very large organizations, you need to kind of map that across in different regions. So, we've had the pleasure of working with Tupperware, which, is an amazing company that is completely committed to women's empowerment. And they have a 3 million strong sales force of direct relationship sort of marketers out there around the world. And, I went and spoke in different centers around the world to 40 MDs who are each in charge of a country, to help socialize the work that we've done with their HQ in Orlando. So everything I just listed out, there can be a sort of smaller version of that is blown out at a regional level. And that's how you telescope your message out. That's how you scale your employee engagement. That's how you empower more and more people within your organization to be culture captains and ambassadors for your brand's purpose and your story inside the company and outside the company. And then we've got, so hopefully that helps, Anderson. And we've got another question here from Lindy. Lindy, hi Lindy. She's saying that makes sense, but what about with a small startup with few resources, few employees, and few abilities to take time that isn't contributing straight to the bottom line? It's the reality. The marketplace is fairly merciless in the sense that, it's demanding more of us from a content and channel point of view, while at the same time, we still have the same number of hours in the day. And so first thing I'd share is share the load. break it out to different people. So someone in the organization, whoever they are in a leadership position, should be writing a blog or should be creating short videos, and schedule that. We have at We First here a media day. You see that I put out videos once a week. The way we do that is that we have a media day where I will do 4 videos at one time. And then we stagger that. We cut those together and then we put them out once a week. And my job is just to think of what those 4 videos would be about, you know, in the course of a month. And then we do it once and it's done and dusted. And then in terms of other things, everyone in the team is challenged here to get Instagram photos out that speak to what we care about. Megan, who works here, kindly finds those images that we share, which speak to the values. So the point is that we share it, we share the load. Secondly, you must schedule it, otherwise it won't happen, because otherwise all the most important things will, you know, those important things will take priority. And then I think the third thing is to have fun with it, both from a creative sense, so you actually enjoy doing it, but also make sure that there's an ROI, in the sense that you're not just putting it out there for no reason, but rather you're putting it out there with a point of view to either bring your story to life, or to, better yet, to have a specific call to action that will build your business. For example, subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, you know, follow us on Instagram, you know, like us on Facebook, or it might be you've got an event coming up. So, you know, if you thought this was valuable, check out our event that's coming up, or, you know, if you want to learn more, go and do our course, or if you found this product helpful, there are more products at our website. So then suddenly you're not just doing social because everyone has to do social and there's all these channels and you're not even sure why you're doing it, and it's like shouting at strangers in the wind, but rather that you're actually building out, you know, something that will build your business, that you're creating content that will, you know, excite people and get them engaged and maintain their engagement over time. And so we've got like 10 minutes left. So please fire away with, you know, any questions that you have, specific things that you're struggling with in terms of your employee engagement, relative to your size, small, large, medium, and so on. And I also want to mention that, as I said at the top, that we've got an event coming up, a live workshop with Conscious Capitalism LA, and we'll be sharing details for that. So if you want to find out information about how to attend that, you could actually even email Jill@wefirstbranding.com, Jill@wefirstbranding.com, and she'll add you to the list just to make sure that you find out all the details about that. And, you know, we've got another question coming through here, which is, okay, thank you, from Bill. Bill says, okay, it's great to engage your employees, but when you make the investment of time, how are you sure that you're getting value for your business? So basically, thanks Bill, what is the ROI of your investment? Well, you can't really know that unless you benchmark it. And by benchmark, I mean that you should have a level set in terms of where you are. And so you can look back in 6 months or 12 months time and see if you've moved the needle. Now, there can be pure metrics like, you know, the number of followers, the number of likes or whatever. But also, and I just want to make the point that a lot of big companies have their own internal social media channels just for their employees. But, you know, benchmark it in terms of what percentage of employees are engaged, and what percentage, how much intel have you learned from those employees as to the different ways that they want to show up inside the company, and what is the increase in share of voice of your company in and around a given area or conversation as a function of your employees being advocates and speaking on behalf of your brand. So the most important thing to do is to benchmark it the same way you do in terms of revenue, is to look at where you are now and where you want to get to. And, you know, in terms of employee engagement, how many employees are engaged? How clearly do they understand your purpose and story? How effectively are they sharing it? How much increase has there been in your share of voice around that given conversation as a function of them sharing effectively? And then really benchmark those things over time. And we've got another question here from Ethical Biz, which is great. Employees are overwhelmed with so many messages and campaigns. How do you cut through the clutter? That is so true. I feel like we're all like mother birds these days. They go out there, gather food, swallow it, and then regurgitate it back at the nest to their baby birds. It's like this constant content regurgitation. And it never seems enough, especially when you've got real-time channels like, Twitter and especially Snapchat, where it's, you're torching content every 24 hours. I think the most important thing to do is one or two things. Firstly, recognize their efforts. So a thank you goes a hell of a long way. When you actually recognize that your team are helping you create the content and that you acknowledge it for doing so, that is one thing. Again, relatedness on a human level. So as busy as they are and as overwhelmed as they are, it's meaningful when they actually get recognized that they're doing something. Then secondly, I think, you can actually reward them for it in some way. Like, maybe someone goes and gets a training day, or maybe someone goes to a conference, that will support their growth, and there's a third part to it, which is you also need to be highly attuned to when people are overwhelmed. Part of the reason we do the strength and stretches at WeFirst, and we try and encourage people to volunteer when they've sort of had enough or it's too much, is so that we sort of avoid that problem. That people have permission to say it's too much. And that alone is very, very powerful. It's very, very powerful for people to say, I need a morning off. I need to go home today. Actually, Jill, who works closely with me here at WeFirst, we looked at each other yesterday afternoon, and I said, Jill, I think you need to leave now, and I think I need to leave too, because even though it was a little bit early, the brain was fried and there was nothing useful that was going to happen for the rest of that afternoon. So we both went off and exercised and did what we had to do. But I think that relatedness, where you recognize that we are human beings that can be overwhelmed, and giving people permission to say that and share that, and then rewarding them and then recognizing the effort that they're making is very, very important. And then to your point about clutter, there's a very, very powerful issue there, which is most brands waste their time and resources on Me Too marketing. And by that I mean they do things that are similar and often indiscernible from their competitors. And what I mean by that is all of the brands in your category use this sort of channel. They all do this sort of work. They do these sorts of promotions. For example, the auto industry, President's Day, or whatever it might be, these mainstays. And their lens on marketing and engagement is through the lens of what everybody does and what's always been done. But if you look at those brands that have truly cut through, and this is all speaks to employee engagement and making them feel like that effort's worthwhile, because if they see their thing blow up and cut through, then they're like, wow, we're doing something different and this is worthwhile. It's those that let their mission define their marketing. So look at REI, what they did with Opt Outside. That's been the darling of all the creative award shows recently, but more importantly, generated a huge amount of earned media for the company. They let their mission lead their marketing, and they said, let's check out on Black Friday and let's all go outside instead of going shopping. Patagonia had done something not dissimilar a long time before with regards to don't buy this jacket in response to Black Friday. I mean, if you look at what Tesla has done, which was so counterintuitive, which was to open up the IP behind its battery technology to auto competitors. Why? Because they were serving their mission of making sustainable mass transportation possible. So when your mission defines what you do and your employees commit to marketing that speaks to your mission, and as a function of that, that marketing cuts through and gets resonance, then your employees are going to be less overwhelmed. They're going to be more excited than ever to create that sort of content that's really on fire and gets people excited. And so that's how. There's one last question here from Habib. Hey Habib, how are you? Are there some simple perks and initiatives a small business can offer to stay competitive with larger companies? Are there some simple perks or initiatives a small business can offer to stay competitive with larger companies? Yeah, I think there are. I think, the beauty of social media, the beauty of your employee base is that you've got access to the same tools and resources that big companies have. And in fact, a lot of big companies are trying to be more nimble and act more small and think more youthfully, while younger companies aren't burdened by the inertia and the siloing and the dysfunction that a lot of big companies have. And so I think the advantage for smaller companies when it comes to their initiatives is think in ways that are more relevant and meaningful to your audience, because you don't have all these levels of bureaucracy in the way. You don't have all this distance between you and your audience where you're in a sort of corporate ivory tower in a sense and you've lost touch with the marketplace. And then relate to them in a more intimate way. And this applies to your employees too. You know, relate to your employees. When you've got 5 people in a company, it's a lot easier to know everybody and get to know them well than when you've got 50. In my experience, it's always been when companies reach 100 people in size, that's when the leadership team walk past and go, does that person work here? They don't even know anymore. And you see all these different functions where, exercises where companies kind of chunk out their employee base into different divisions or groups or business units or hub and spoke models. So where they try to maintain that relatedness between people at a group level and at a cultural level. So I would think that intimacy is one of the huge advantages of scale that you have as a smaller company, and let that inform your initiatives and the perks you provide and so on. And so we're in the last couple of minutes here. I want to thank everyone for your contributions and questions. I really, really hope it's been meaningful. And, you know, we've been recording this and we'll share it at a later date in case you want to share it with anybody else. And also, I mean, we're constantly sharing content that we hope is meaningful and adds value to your business. So we'd invite you to follow to join the WeFirst blog by subscribing. You just go to wefirstbranding.com and click on the blog and you'll be able to subscribe there and everything will get sent to you. I'd invite you to follow me, Simon Mainwaring, on Snapchat and on Twitter, and also WeFirst Branding. Follow us as well. And we're just constantly putting content out there that should be meaningful in terms of adding value to your business. So I hope that these insights on employee engagement have been useful. Do not ever undervalue the heart and humanity that your employees bring to your job every day. And if you look at them through that lens and relate to them in that way and allow them to frame your marketing as human beings, you'll obviously relate to your audiences out there, whoever they are, B2B or B2C, in much more compelling ways. And as a result, your employees will build your business with you much faster and you'll have much greater impact as a result. So thank you everyone for your time. Have a really great rest of the week and look forward to connecting on the next Blab as well. See you later.